Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by the Hockey Podcast Network. As we mentioned at the top of the show, we are joined by a very special guest making his second appearance ever on the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast. We welcome on Matt Vensel, Penguins writer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. How's it going today, Matt?
I'm doing well as I can in this weather. Just was out for a walk with the dogs, braving the cold, and I'm happy to talk Pens with you guys.
Well, I'm glad to see that you're warming up there into your house, but the Penguins, they haven't had to warm up too much as of late. They've been on fire, and the good news depends on who you ask, but the good news has kept on rolling as Jeff Carter signed a 2-year extension on Wednesday afternoon. So before I even ask about what that means about Ron Hextall's plans, what do you think of the Jeff Carter signing as a whole?
I think it's a great compromise for both sides. I mean, Jeff just turned 37. Obviously, there's a question of his age, but based on how he's aged to this point, that has the potential to at least be a pretty good value, in the annual salary. And for Jeff, he said last year when they traded for him, he initially had some hesitation about coming here, and since then it's been a great fit. He moved his family out from California, which is no small thing. So for him, he gets that security with the no move clause, which is a big deal. So I think it's a win-win. Maybe he gave up a little bit to get the trade protection, but I think for him it's worth it. And now we'll just see how everyone slots in around his contract.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what does this offseason look like in terms of signing these free agents coming up?
Yeah, so we just heard from Ron Hextall today. He once again said that they would like to have Malkin and Letang back. He said ideally they could bring all these guys back. That includes Rust and Rodriguez and Kapanen, but, he also kind of acknowledged that that's not probably realistic. So, it's just a question, I think, with the two big ones of what they're willing to give, in terms of the annual value and the length, and he did say if these guys want to maximize their value, that might not happen here, saying, yeah, some of these guys might have to take a bit of a pay cut. So I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But everybody involved say that they want to be back. I mean, the new ownership group, their chairman, Tom Warner, said a few weeks ago that they want Malkin and Letang back. Those guys have said in the past month they want to come back. So it's just about finding that compromise. And Hextall today said the talks have been fine and they're still ongoing. So we'll see where that ultimately leads.
Yeah, and going into the season, there was no question that the Penguins' depth was going to be tested, whether it be through injuries or COVID situations. But how impressed are you with these depth pieces like Brian Boyle or Dom Simone or other call-ups in their play this year?
Yeah, I think to me that's the story of the season, with all due respect to Tristan Jarry. Even over this run here, going 17-2, they've had 29 different players play, 3 goalies, 26 skaters. I think 22 different guys have scored goals, including Bjorkquist and Zahorna, who started the year in the minors. So, and then it's guys like Evan Rodriguez, who was a healthy scratch in last year's playoffs, playing so well for them. So it's really top to bottom, the contributions they've gotten. So, I think it's fair to wonder if we're going to see guys like Rodriguez and Dan Heinen keep it going. But at minimum, they had a big hand in the first half of the season in getting the Penguins through this difficult stretch.
I'm glad you mentioned Evan Rodriguez there. I mean, he notched 2 assists on Tuesday, but that was his first points since being demoted to around the Penguins' third line, taken off the top power play unit in association with the return of Evgeny Malkin. How worried should the coaches be about his production if he's not in that top 6 role?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is fair to wonder about, him turning into a pumpkin, so to speak. I mean, everything he did in the first half of the season was a total outlier from everything we've seen from him. And you don't often see that from guys his age. I believe he's 28. Now, he's a skilled guy. He's played with skilled guys before. He's shown it in flashes. But to string it together with that consistency is something new. So, I think it's fair for them to maybe have some worry that, they're going to see more of the guy that they had here in the first couple of years. But, I still think he's a useful guy. He's getting an opportunity to play on the second power play. I'd give him a shot with Malkin. So he's going to get opportunities to continue to produce. And he's talked a lot about confidence. Even admitted that maybe he was shaken a little bit here recently with the slump. But for me, the big question is, how is he handling and how will he continue to handle potentially playing on the third line, because it was clear playing so much was a big deal to him in terms of, one, his confidence, and two, he talked a lot about just like having the puck on his stick more throughout the course of the game just made him more and more comfortable when he was playing on the top line.
And we know Jari's been incredible so far this season, but looking into the backup goalie situation, what's going on there? Was this team ready to commit to Louis Domingue, or are they still confident in Casey DeSmith? I know, I think it was Hextall said they were, but how important is it to have a steady backup for this team, and who could it be aside from between Louis Domingue and Casey DeSmith?
Yeah, I think it's a huge deal, on multiple fronts. I mean, one, Tristan Jarry is on pace to play like 65, 70 games. They probably should try to lighten his load, although he seems to be thriving with that workload. Two, I think they need a more proven veteran option in case he gets hurt or in case he falters. I mean, in the playoffs, again, I mean, the stakes are high for this team. They look like one of the top 6-7 teams in the league. So, that would be a nice insurance policy to have. And then you just look at the fact that, I mean, the stat to me that stands out with Casey is the fact that he's only played in 9 games. And that says they just don't trust the guy. He's gotten pulled or allowed 3 or more goals in 7 of those 9 games. So, Hextall said, yeah, we believe in this guy. We're going to get him going. He's not going to come out and say, hey, GMs, come try to rip me off in a trade. But I do think this is a situation where something has to give, or they have to make a move, because this is untenable. And, Louis Domingue is on one of those little scooters in a boot on such a fluke play. I mean, he wasn't even, it was like at the end of a drill, and he appeared to have just kind of let up and Boyle threw the puck of the net, hit him in the foot, and he fell over. So that's your Penguins season in a nutshell. So I do think they need to make a trade. And to me, a guy who makes a ton of sense if he's willing to come here, because he has some no move protection, I believe, is Yarrow Halak. Jim Rutherford's there. Is there a deal that could be had involving, maybe you send Casey's salary there, they have similar money, you throw in a pick, or maybe one of the prospects that maybe the new regime isn't as high on, and you go from there. So I think that's something that, at least on paper, makes a ton of sense to me.
Do you think that Ron Hextall could have looked at Patrick Allvin before he got out of Pittsburgh and said, hey, you have a backup goalie out there that I would be very interested in if you want to toss him our way, or at least open the negotiation here face to face?
I don't know if he would have said that, but that certainly sounds like something Brian Burke would say. He's a little bit more, a little bit of a bigger personality.
Obviously. Yeah, he's definitely, that's one way to put it for sure. But no, we mentioned Teddy Bluger just as soon as you jumped on the call here. Obviously, the biggest story in Pittsburgh today for sure. But with Teddy Bluger being sidelined now for 6 to 8 weeks, whether the hit you think was clean or not clean, he's out. That's the fact that you have to deal with. Plus Jason Zucker now recovering from a surgery. Do you think Ron Hextall is looking to add a piece up front as well to help bolster the current lineup?
I don't think so. I mean, his comments today, he basically said we're happy with everything. And I think that to me was just like GM speak for not wanting to tip his hand. But I do think there is one area that they feel good about. It would be up front. I mean, it's fair to wonder about Brian Boyle, playing every night and playing, 2-3 more minutes a game. I mean, I think he's done pretty well in the very small role that he had, playing under 11 minutes. So, but I do think they have options to fill in. I mean, Evan Rodriguez could play center if they needed to. I think Kasper Bjorkquist did all right if they need to bring in a guy in the wing. So I think, to me, adding someone up front before the deadline would be a luxury unless, Bluger or Zucker aren't going to come back. I mean, I think the needs are the backup goalie situation, and I also would bring in a defenseman to push Chad Ruhwedel.
Makes total sense. What are your thoughts on the defense this year aside from Ruhwedel? It's been an interesting case because, Letang and Duma are what they are, but Mike Madison getting paid a lot of money to play on the third line. What is this defense looking like going forward?
Yeah, and I will say, I think Chad's been pretty solid. I just see that as an area where, one, you can upgrade, and two, you could maybe look to bring in a guy with, more size and physicality, which is something they've talked about since they got here. But, overall, at least until this recent stretch, I think the story was just that they have been able to roll out the same 3 pairs for 2.5 months now, and none of them were playing poorly. More recently, we've seen Letang just play at a level that, one of the highest levels of play, in my opinion, in his career. I mean, over the last 19 games, I think he has like 4 goals, 24 points, and a plus 18 rating. So he's been incredible, and especially when you consider his age. So, I just think it's a situation where these guys have all settled in with their partner. All these guys have been here since at least the start of last season. So there's continuity, there's familiarity, and we've seen some slippage in the team defense overall here the last couple of weeks. But I think for the most part, the defense is probably been a little bit better than expected, especially when you look at the third pair and them losing Cody Ceci.
Yeah, and to step away from the Penguins, but ask a question that of someone who still has Pittsburgh ties for sure. Have you seen this situation? What are your thoughts on the idea of the Capitals being interested in Marc-Andre Fleury? Like, what are your takes? And
I didn't see that. Okay.
No, it's a small rumor, but it's been floated around that the Capitals looking for some consistent goaltending and something above league average goaltending. Marc-Andre Fleury on a team that are sellers in the Blackhawks. Would a situation like that be a long shot? Does Fleury still believe he is a Penguin at heart, and would he ever agree to a trade to play in Washington?
Yeah, I mean, all you've heard is that he doesn't want to go anywhere. I mean, he was, kind of hesitant to go to Chicago in the first place because he didn't want to move his family. So I don't know about moving twice in the same year. I mean, I think I'm not 100% sure about what his trade protection is. I mean, I think it's limited, so some of that is out of his hands. But one would think if he didn't want to go to Washington, that Chicago would do him a solid. I mean, given that he said, all right, Chicago, I will come there. I don't necessarily want to come there. I would like to think that they would, fulfill whatever his wishes were in terms of whether he wanted to move or not move and all that stuff. And then it comes down to the question of, will he go to Washington?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know Mark well at all. I mean, I came on the beat after he had left, but I could see him being a guy who would not want to do that. He cares so much about how the fans view him here. I mean, obviously he's got a hunger to win, but I think that might be something that would be hard. I mean, it'd certainly be hard for us to see, but I don't know if that's something he'd want to go for, even if I meant a chance to chase a cup.
I got one last question for you, Matt, and it's a little bit more of a looking into the future, just fun question. With the top of the Metropolitan Division having 4 really stout teams, I mean, obviously we've talked Penguins, but you have the Rangers, you have the Hurricanes, you have the Capitals. Which of those teams in a potential second versus third place matchup do you think the Penguins would match up with the best, and which one selfishly would you want to cover the most?
Man, I mean, I still think I like the matchup of the Capitals. I mean, I know they have some physicality that gives them problems. Ovechkin his season has been ridiculous given his age, but I still think their speed and their depth, and especially if they get the goaltending too, that's a matchup where they could potentially play their style and take it to the Capitals. The Rangers, I think, would be a good matchup too, although the X factor would be Shesterkin. I mean, he's arguably been the best goalie in the league, but beyond him, I like that. I mean, I definitely would not want to face Carolina, even though they're young and less experienced. That to me would probably be the most entertaining series to watch, or another installment of Pens Caps. I don't know. I'm going to say Pens Caps because you know what? This could be the last time we see Ovechkin, Crosby in the playoffs. I mean, probably not, but you never know. I mean, both those guys are going to be with their respective teams for a little while here, you would think. But as we saw with Chicago and the Kings, life comes at you fast. So one of these teams could drop out of playoff contention here in the near future.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. Before we let you go, just let us know what's coming up for you at the Post-Gazette and what can we keep our eyes out for?
Yeah, just I don't have anything big coming down the pipeline here. I mean, I have my regular Friday column from The Point. This week, I'm going to look at the quote unquote Malkin effect. People think that Malkin comes back and the rest of the team forgets how to play hockey. I found some numbers that suggest that isn't necessarily the case. So you can look for that. But just in general, check out the Post-Gazette. Me and Mike DeFabo are working hard for you guys, trying to pump out some good stuff. So come check it out. Follow us on Twitter, and we've got a podcast too. So we got a lot of different ways you guys can get our stuff.
Sounds good. Thank you again, Matt. We appreciate you giving us all your time.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.